Hey everybody, this is Matt Cox, and I wanted to do a quick intro video to the channel. I just want to go over what the channel is about, what it's supposed to, what my goal is with the channel. As most of you guys know, or maybe you don't, I was recently released from federal prison about a year ago. It was in 2019. So what happened was I was given 26 years in prison, and I went to federal prison, and as I was fighting my case to get my sentence reduced, or get released from prison, or although I'm guilty of sin, so that was never going to happen. But at least get my sentence reduced. So I started hearing more and more guys' stories, and some of these guys just they have amazing stories, just better than anything you've seen in the movies. And so I started writing my own story because I'd been on a bunch of TV shows, and I was in a bunch of magazines. I was in Fortune magazine, and I was on Dateline and American Greed, and a bunch of TV shows and a bunch of newspapers about my own personal crimes. And I started listening to more and more guys' stories, and I ended up writing my own memoir, which is a book called Shark in a Housing Pool. And then as I did that, and guys started reading it, guys started telling me, you ought to talk to this guy, you ought to talk to this guy. And so I ended up writing a story about a guy named Ephraim Deveroli. I wrote a book, I wrote his memoir, which is called Once a Gun Runner. Anyway, Ephraim Deveroli is a guy that had been in Rolling Stone, and his story ended up getting made into the movie War Dogs. So then I wrote a story about a guy named Douglas Dodd, and I ended up getting a book deal for him also, and that book was called Generation Oxy. And I ended up getting him into Rolling Stone magazine. We sold the film rights to his movie, or to his book. So what ultimately ended up happening was that I started realizing that these stories had value, and that these guys' life rights had value also. And the problem is that a lot of guys in prison, or a lot of guys' stories, the media gets a hold of it, some writer gets a hold of it, they end up writing these guys' stories, and then they give the guys nothing. And there's countless examples of this. Movies that were made where they either barely spoke to the actual individual, or they spoke to that person, and then a lot of reporters will make kind of semi promises for you to cooperate, and the next thing you know, they sell the life rights, a movie gets made, you don't end up getting anything. So I decided to go to these guys and kind of explain how it worked, and get them to sign their life rights over. And then in order for them to sign their life rights over, I would also write their story. Then I told them, when I ultimately get myself out of prison, I'll take the story and I'll try and get it in newspaper magazine, or newspapers, or magazine articles. I'll try and sell the film rights to the story. I'll try and get your story turned into a documentary, or a film, or a series, or whatever I can do when I get out. So the last few years of my incarceration, I really started collecting guys' stories. I started writing what are called true crime synopses, which are really long-form synopses of stories, more like a newspaper, or sorry, a magazine, a true crime magazine article, but instead of 6,000 words, these things end up becoming 12,000 or 18,000 words. So it's a long-form story that isn't actually a book, although I have written several books also. So when I got out of prison, which was in 2019, I had connected with, while I was incarcerated, I connected with a bunch of newspaper reporters and journalists, and regarding some of the stories I'd written. So I connected with some of them. One of those guys was a guy named Davey Rothbart. So Davey started pitching some of my stories in Los Angeles, and he ended up getting interest from a production company by the name of Blumhouse Productions. So Blumhouse did like the Purge, they did Split, they did what did they do recently? Get Out. They did the movie Invisible Man. And they also do several streaming series for like Hulu and Netflix. Matter of fact, they do one of my favorite series, which is a show called Handmaid's Tale, or The Handmaid's Tale, and that's a series that they do, and it's on Hulu. So Davey came to me and said, "Look, they're super interested. Can we have let's set up a meeting?" So we set up a couple of phone calls. Those ended up becoming Zoom meetings, and then I was supposed to go out to Los Angeles and meet with everybody and negotiate a contract. And they wanted to do a series on me being in prison writing stories about my fellow inmates, which was great because every episode or every 2 or 3 episodes would cover one of my stories, and it would also bounce between the guy's stories and me and that person, that subject being I was incarcerated with, writing their story and how the whole story unfolded also while we were incarcerated, which was a pretty cool concept, which basically was Davey and I's idea. So they loved it. They were interested. They wanted me to come out. And about 2 weeks before I was supposed to fly out, COVID-19 hit, and suddenly I wasn't allowed to fly out to Los Angeles. And then they said, well, we'll do a Zoom meeting, and that ended up being postponed, and we ended up having a small Zoom meeting, and then the larger one got postponed, and everything got put off, and ultimately, according to Davey, basically because there's so much going on in the industry right now, and so many things are just being sidelined and put off, that ultimately he's saying that basically he feels like the whole deal's just dead. So and I understand that it's not just them, it's everybody, it's the industry in general. Also, I have a couple other stories that I had pitched to several other production companies, and I even talked to one producer that I'd spoken to a bunch, and super nice woman, and she had explained that she actually had 2 investors suing to get their money back that they had put up to make 2 movies because they're so flipped out that the whole industry has changed. They're afraid movie theaters might close. Nobody knows what's happening. So I've had a bunch of stuff fall apart. Also had 2 documentaries fall apart. So had a ton of stuff fall apart. I got another one of my stories, which is a story about a credit card guy, and that's a documentary we are supposed to shoot a sizzle reel in New York, can't go to New York. So I've had all kinds of things just fall apart. So during this whole thing, I've kind of decided, what's happening is I'm relying on all these other people to take my stories and run with them, and that may work and it may not work. But what I need to do is I need to start pushing forward on my own. And what I'm going to do is I'm starting this channel to hope to garner interest in the stories. Most of the stories, almost all the stories actually, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2, are already narrated and they're on the actual on the channel. What I'm planning to do with the channel is this: planning on reviewing movies about con men or crime in general. I'm planning on doing a vlog maybe a couple times a week. Just on what I'm doing. It may be, I may be painting because I also I have a degree in fine arts and I paint for a living, is one of the things I do. I also sell books. I threw that out there. I also sell books, true crime books. So the vlogs may be just about what I'm currently working on. Maybe it's a painting I'm working on. Maybe it's a story I'm working on. It's just how I'm trying to progress. I'm kind of going to try and document my struggle just by doing kind of like a vlog. And I also think I'll probably do some reactionary videos to other YouTubers. And I'm going to try and grow my channel, and I'm going to try and put in some actual effort, which I haven't been putting any real effort into the channel, and that was a mistake. I thought that things were going great, and I could not foresee a global pandemic, or I would have invested heavily in face masks. But what's happening is, this is my channel, this is what I'm going to do, and the overall goal of the channel is this. I would like to get my true crime stories turned into either documentaries, films, or series, streaming series of some type. It doesn't have to be a streaming series. It could be any series, whatever, into a series. And that's really what the channel is kind of about and what I'm trying to move towards. And it's kind of a journey, and I don't really know how it's going to work out, and I don't know if it is going to work out. I know that I'm going to make a valid attempt, and I think that I'm going to ultimately succeed at it. And the way I look at it is this: when I initially got incarcerated, I got 26 years, and my out date was 2030. So I ended up getting out of prison more than a decade before I was supposed to. More than a decade before the federal government wanted me to. I did 12 and a half years in federal prison, and the way I see it is this: I can dedicate the next 10 years to this endeavor, and even if I fail, I'm better off than I would have been had I done all that time. So that's really where I'm at. That's what the channel's about. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm going to push forward to. And look, I'm not so proud. I'm not willing to take suggestions from anybody willing to help. So that's where I'm at, and that's it. That's Inside True Crime. That's my channel, and this is my journey.